What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today I have sort of a follow-up video to the salary cap video that I did a couple weeks ago. I just felt like after seeing some comments and even somebody mentioned this exact thing in a comment, like there could be a part 2 to this, and there is enough information for one. Now it's not going to be a very long video, but there is some additional information I wanted to get out to you guys to help you guys in better managing your team now that you have an idea of how to use the salary cap, how that salary cap works and functions, the numbers that you need to look for. Now, what do you do with it going forward? And that's what this video is going to be about. So we're going to go over a few different things. So let's start off here on this screen. So last video, we talked about all the different things you needed to look at from the top, also at the player level. And we also played around with a few things to just show you guys what to expect when it comes to cutting and trading players. Now, I had quite a few comments asking me about trading players, and I just want to let you guys know trading players is treated the same as cutting players. So whether you trade them or cut them, if there is dead money, if there is guaranteed money left on the contract, which you can find here underneath this penalty area, you will be liable for that amount. It doesn't matter how you do it. Unfortunately, Madden doesn't give us the option to like have a player take on a contract or anything like that to help alleviate some type of cap situation like they do in the real world. So just know if you trade a player, it's the same as if you cut them. That guaranteed money will still be put onto your cap penalty, and you'll still have to pay that out to the player for this season and for next season. And if you guys are still confused about, what all of these numbers mean, I highly recommend you go and check out part 1 of this, the salary cap breakdown. It tells you exactly what all these things do. The salary, which is, the amount that you can save because it's not guaranteed, the bonus amount or signing bonus, which is considered the penalty on this screen, and how it breaks down and how it's paid out and all sorts of that kind of fun stuff. So go back and watch that video if you haven't seen it and you are still trying to figure that stuff out. It's all available there for you in the first video. The next thing I want to let you guys know about is the salary cap. Right now we're in 2023. It is at 225 million. And I mentioned in the last video, this will change from year to year. I have went and I got the numbers. So the salary cap increase, we know that in 2023, it is at 225 million. Once you go to 2024, it's going to jump to 250. It's the biggest increase from year to year that Madden offers in the salary cap. Once you get to 25, it's 270 million. 2026 is 280 million, and then it caps out in 2027 at 285 million. Every single season, it will be 285 thereafter. So there is no way of getting more money. There's no way of it dropping. It's going to be a straight 285 for the rest of your franchise. So if you play for 20 years, you got to work with 285. The nice thing about that is Madden seems to, whether they did it on purpose or not, adjust how players request contracts in the future, and it's really, really top heavy. First, though, before we get to the future and see what sort of things look like at that point, I want to go over the contract restructuring tool. Now, this is something that I didn't mention, and I saw that it tells you exactly what it does, so I just figured I don't need to mention it, but I had a few comments regarding it, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to talk about it here now. So a contract restructure is something that is available to a player that has at least 2 seasons left in their contract. So if you go to their player card like Brian O'Neill here and you go all the way to the bottom, it's going to be listed underneath edit player as restructure contract. And it's very simple how this works. You click on it, it's going to tell you exactly how it's going to take the money. And it's different for every player. So there's not an exact science to how much of it they're going to take off. From what I have figured out, it's somewhere between like 50 and 70% of what they are currently marked against the cap right now that they're going to alleviate you from. But I couldn't figure out an exact science for it, so I do apologize for that. But for instance, Brian O'Neill, he will save us 10.5 million this season if we restructure him. And it tells you exactly how it's going to take this money and move it. It's going to take 3.5 million for each of the rest of the season, so he has 3 years left, and they're going to add that to the rest of the contract. So whatever his dollar amount is at the end of the season, so let's just take a look here. Next year, instead of 19.9, it would now be 22.5. This one would now be 25.5, and this final number would be 23. Yeah, 23 million. And that's exactly how it will break it all down. So if we go here, we decide to restructure. Yes. Boom, we have just restructured his contract. And now we're going to go back and we're going to look, and you can see now that all of these numbers have now changed. And you can do that for any player as long as they have 2 years left on their contract. It'll tell you at the bottom of their player card if they are eligible for it or not. I have seen some scenarios where like players just do not have it as an option. There was an issue with it at the beginning of the Madden cycle, so I can't tell you anything to fix it if it doesn't show up, but just if you have somebody, they have at least 2 years left on their deal, go ahead, look at it, and it will give you that option. If it doesn't give you that option, I'm sorry, I don't know how to fix that for you or what the exact situation is. I just know that it is what it is. The one thing that you can do is you can restructure contracts even if you just re-signed the player. So if they're on a 1-year deal and you re-sign them to a 4-year deal like I just did Cam Akers here, you can still restructure. I don't believe this is something that should be allowed, but I guess it's something where it gives us some type of fluidity within the contracts and the salaries. The thing though is if you sign into a big contract, you're not restructuring the big contract. You are only restructuring the current year. Okay, and what I mean by that is when you re-sign a player, Cam Akers, for instance, they have a contract for this season. When you re-sign them, it is still holding that contract. And you can see here that Akers has only a $1.29 million salary hit, even though I just re-signed him to a big contract. And then it jumps mightily in the second year because that is when it is paying them that money. The first year, the 2023 or the current year that you're in, is still the contract that they were under. If I did a restructure on Cam Akers right now, it's definitely not going to be a very good restructure because it's only 1.29 million. Chances are if you're doing this with a player and they re-sign them, it's not going to save you that much money. So just keep that in mind, but it is something that you can do if you still really desperately need some cap room. The other tidbit to know, and I saw somebody put this in the comments of that video, the rollover cap that we discussed in the last video, there is a cap on it. So you can only get $35 million extra per season. So if you have a season where you have 100 million that you didn't spend, it doesn't matter. You're only going to have 35 million available to you next season. And that's just, the way it is. But I think that's probably for the best because I could see some people definitely getting into some serious trouble if they had an extra 100 million to play with and just went crazy. I mentioned in the last video, and I'll say it again here because I think the Browns are a good, sort of feeler for this. Just because you have the rollover cap does not mean you should always use it because of things like rookie reserve, cap penalty coming through, and obviously your salaries increasing from year to year. And like if you look at the Browns here in the top left, they have a 225 million cap, of course, like everybody else. They have 27.6 million in rollover. But look over at their cap space. Their cap space is 27.4, which means that they were negative. And they would have been negative if it had not been for the rollover money. And that is how you can quickly get things out of hand, because now if the Browns, they go ahead and they spend all 27.4 million, and we know that 2024's cap is going to be 250, they have already spent 250 million technically towards that cap if things stay the way they are. That's not including any cap penalty. That's also not including any rookie reserve money that they would have to account for. So while it's not exactly black and white, there are some gray areas there. There are some, obviously, contracts will fall off and whatnot. For the most part, all the players on your current roster are going to get expensive each year you have them. So if you retain a lot of your roster every year, your contracts are going to go up in how much you spent. And if you use the cap to add a bunch of extra free agents, or have a bunch of draft picks, or you cut a big name player and you have a $18 million cap penalty like the Browns, you can put yourself in a hole very, very quickly by using all of the allocated resources you have from not only your current cap space, but your rollover from the previous season. So just be very careful when you are messing with the rollover. Make sure that you understand, okay, yes, I'm spending the 30 million that I have available to me, but I know that I'm getting rid of 2 huge contracts. They're going to be much more than 30 million. So I will be fine in the long run. But if you plan on keeping your team together, all the players you have, at least all the good players you have, and you have a lot of draft picks, and you decide to go crazy and spend all the money you still have, you could end up being negative literally within one season. It is possible. So you can't go crazy on it. You have to, be mindful of the money you have and the money that you're going to have to pay later on down the line. All right, so before I started recording, I was doing some toying around with the rosters, and I want to show you guys what some expectations you should have for players in the future. I went ahead and I jacked up quite a few players on this teams overall, so that they would be asking for like max contract types. And here we are. So I took Mac Pittman. He was an 84 overall. He was only asking for 98 million for a total contract over 4 years. It was a very low amount. When you get to, you know, a few 4, 5, 6 years down the line in your franchise, you're going to start noticing trends, and you can adjust things like XP sliders or draft strength to offset this. But this is just, if you don't touch any of that stuff and you just play your game and just keep on moving, this is sort of what the landscape is going to look like throughout the league that you have to worry about, because this affects your contract amount. So Patrick Mahomes, 99, Lamar Jackson, 99, Joe Burrow, 98, Jalen Hurts, 98, Brock Purdy, 97, Josh Allen, 97. And then it's finally Mac Pittman, the guy who I just said was probably one of the best in the league. He's actually the 5th or 6th rated quarterback, and he's still asking for over 300 million. You can do the same for running backs. You're going to have a bunch of people up here at the top because all the players that were already good are still here. We're only 4 years in the future, and there's no way for running backs to just fall off like they do in real life. Wide receivers, you're going to have a ton of really good players here, which can be good and bad for you, right? The reason I say that is because the more players that are above your players overall, the less money they're going to ask for. So I purposely didn't spend any money. I have 165 million in cap room. I have 35 million of it as rollover, and I can negotiate with Mac Pittman. Now, he's asking for a very, very big contract. It's going to be 46 million at the very start and 62 by the end of it. It is a very big contract. It's going to take a huge chunk out of it. And now, knowing that you are only going to have 285 at this point in the future, you can sort of piece together how much money you're going to have available to you if you sign some big name positions. So if we go ahead and sign Mac Pittman, that's going to be, let's just say on average, 50 million a season. Well, that's 50 out of 285 that's already allocated for before you even get to the rest of the 52 players on your roster. So you have to just sort of decide how many big name players you want to have on your team and where you're going to place them. Because if you do it at quarterback, that's going to be a big chunk. Maybe you can have 1 or 2 more players. Let's just see. We're going to offer him this. We'll see if he takes it. Apparently he doesn't even like us, so that's great. Very friendly. So if we do it very friendly to get him here, we're up to 470 million, right? Because look at his interest. His interest is nothing. He does not want to be here at all. He hates the Vikings. Screw you, Mac Pittman, by the way. But anyway, he is not a fan of the Vikings. So if you want to keep a player that does not want to be with your team, you either have to turn off the motivational impact altogether, or if you want to keep it realistic and have that be a determining factor, you have to overpay. And if we have to overpay for a guy like Mac Pittman, where we're paying him 60 to $80 million a year over the course of 7 years, that's about a third, little under a third of our entire cap space dedicated to one position. So then you have to ask yourself, do we want to do this with a quarterback that is this good, or do we want to replace a quarterback? In my opinion, quarterback, if you have a really good one, are very hard to come by and get this high. So you can go ahead and re-sign him, but man, it's going to hurt your cap in the long run big time. So let's just get him signed. We have it under contract. We know he's staying. And now let's look at some of the other contracts here. Eric Gills, center. He's an 83 overall. That is a pretty good overall player. And he's actually ranked pretty high for center. He's the 5th ranked center. And he's asking for 12 million a season, which now his overall does not dictate that, but his status in the league puts him up to 12 million a season at a center position, even though that's not one of the higher paid positions. I also beefed up Ivan Pace Jr., and now he is the, what is he, like the 8th ranked linebacker? Number 2. Okay. So Ivan Pace is the number 2 linebacker in the entire league, and we can get a good idea of what kind of contract you can expect a high caliber middle linebacker to cost you. He's asking for 20 million a season. That's really not bad at all. And that's why I mean, it is possible to pay some of these positions and still find value elsewhere, because Madden sort of, like I said, whether it's on purpose or by accident, they make the contracts very top heavy. And some positions just don't think they're worth anything. For instance, middle linebacker, 20 million a season. Yes, it is a lot, but we're in the future. He's the number 2 player in the entire league. He's asking for 20 million a year. I don't think that's a bad option. So now we know we could probably afford to have Ivan Pace, and we could probably afford to have the quarterback Mac Pittman. And now let's look at some of the other positions. Matteo Medrano here, wide receiver, he's a 95 overall. He is the 9th best receiver, and he is asking for about 20 to 25 million a season. And here we go. Look at here, Andrew Booth, 77 overall. Obviously at this point, probably a depth player. He's 27, normal development. He's not going to be your number 1. You definitely don't want him to be a 1 or a 2, probably a 3. If you have him as your 3, you're probably looking pretty good. And he's asking for 2 years, 6 million. Ryan O'Neal, what is his overall ranking? He's got to be high because linemen do not go up very well. He's number 4. Okay, yeah. So him at being a top 5 tackle in the league, he's asking for 2 years, 42. That's a pretty big offering piece. That's 20 million a year as well. So essentially what you're looking at here is anybody outside of quarterback is essentially asking for 20 to 25 million a season for being who they are. Mekhi Blackman, he is a 96 overall, but he is 29. So that will factor in, but he's still the number 4 ranked corner. So now because of that, he is asking for 22.8 million for 1 season. I also beefed up a running back, a 96 overall running back. Granted, he's probably number 8 or 9 in the league because of how many there are in this league right now. Is 16 a year? That's not bad. That's really not that bad. And then Sean Sims. So let's take a look at just how this team shakes up and breaks down now that we have 4 or 5 really big contracts. We have 4 or 5 absolutely great players on this team. We have Mac Pittman at quarterback. We have Ivan Pace at middle linebacker. We have Sean Sims at free safety. And we have Matteo Medrano at wide receiver. So that is 4 high quality players. Actually, let's throw in Jordan Addison. 5 very high quality players above 90s on this roster. What does that do to the rest of the team? Well, if you look at the top, we have a $285 million cap. We already know that. We're past 2027. It's going to be 285 for the rest of, eternity. Our salaries is already spent at $276 million. So we're almost to that cap. We're 9 million away from being at the cap. We have cap space of 44.1 only because we have $35 million in rollover. But we also have contracts that are going to be due this season. And we have more players to bring in because this team is nowhere near a team. Let's just look. Quarterback, we're set. Running back, yeah, we have a good young core there, but nothing to write home about. We don't have a fullback. We only have 2 receivers. Outside of that, it is a bunch of no names. We have an aging tight end and a decent second option in Brenton Bolware. We have a good young left tackle that we can build up. We have nobody at the left guard, center, or the right guard position. And we also don't have a right tackle. We have nobody at left end. Tony Kershaw, also a decent player at right end, but his rookie contract's coming up, which means he's going to want a payday. We have 1 player at D tackle, which is also on the last year of his deal. We have a 65 overall at our outside linebacker position. We have another player on the last year of their deal with LaMarcus Howard. We have a decent player at outside linebacker. And then our cornerback room is very, very hurt right now. 77 is our best player, and then it drops to a 71. And of course, we're good at free safety, and we have a decent player at strong safety. So even though we have 5 players at a 95 overall, look at our overall team. An 81 offense and 81 defense for an 81 overall altogether. So essentially what I'm trying to get to say to you guys here, I know that I sort of been rambling here for about 5 minutes or whatever it is. I don't know how long it's going to be in this video at the end. Is you cannot sign all of your best players. You just can't. Not because it's impossible, but because you are going to hurt elsewhere if you do this. No team should have 5 players at a 95 or above on them, right? But let's just say we didn't do one of these, or 2 of them even. We had 3 players at a 95 overall. We would still be hurting in a few years because we have quite a few players that we need to re-sign of our own, and we have very, very little depth, and we have some glaring holes in the rest of this roster. Cornerback is bad. Outside linebacker is not good. Defensive line, offensive line, tight end is getting up there. Wide receiver depth is gone. So You can sign a big player like Matt Pittman. You can sign big players at other positions. But if you have a lot of this money allocated to these type of players, you are going to be hurting in every other category. So what I'm trying to get at is just be mindful, think things through, and try not to overspend just because you like a player. And now let's talk about some guys where you can afford to maybe not re-sign. Quarterbacks, I'm probably going to replace them after they get up to like a 97 overall. It's just they ask for too much money. 70 million a year is just not enough, especially since Madden doesn't keep up with inflation long enough to go above 285. Running back is a position that you can always find a running back in the draft or free agency. There's a lot of them. So if you need to save some money, running back is a great spot to do that. Fullback, we don't even have it on the roster. You don't even need one. If you do, snag one out of free agency or just keep an extra tight end and you'll be fine. Wide receiver, I would only pay for one. Don't try to get fancy and have two stud receivers on your team as much as you would like to, because it's just not worth it. We're accounting for 50 million of the cap just with two wide receivers, and then add in the 75 or whatever for Mac Pittman, and now we're up to over 100, almost 125 million for three players with a $285 million cap. So wide receivers, don't overpay too much. I say if you want a really solid one, go ahead and pay for them, but then you have to fill in the rest through the draft. Tight ends don't seem to ask for that much, so I would say tight end is something that you can pay, because Bulware is only wanting like 5 million right now a season, which really isn't all that much to ask for, especially if you can get him up and he wants a 4 or 5 year deal. You can get him up to an 80-85 and he's still only like 5 million a year. And then at that point, he's going to be 28, 29, and it's time to replace him anyway. I feel like you can replace offensive linemen very easily because the game doesn't seem to register their overalls very often. It seems as if you can have a 95 overall tackle and he will play very, very similar to that of a 76 overall tackle. The game just doesn't know how to code them properly. So if you want a little bit of a cheap workaround, you can sort of, I wouldn't say, you don't want 64s, right? You don't want 64s and 68s. But if you have to run a line that is strictly 70 to 79, I think that you will be fine there, and it'll also save you a bunch of money in the long run. So try not to pay too much for a top end tackle or even interior lineman. Interior lineman before tackle for sure, because tackles have premier money. Over to the defense. Defensive line is very important. It is very important to me, and I think that the Madden knows that too. If you need to invest in a position, your front seven is probably one of the best positions to invest in. So I would try my best to find quality players here, because you will notice if these players are not up to par very easily. Your line will have a hard time stopping the run. You won't be able to make pressure at all. Just if there's three positions that you should always try to pay and find the best players for, it should be the left end, right end, and defensive tackle. They're very, very important to the overall structure of your defense. Same with outside linebackers. Now, this depends on what kind of defense you're running. If you are running a 3-4, then you need edge rushers. You need outside linebackers that are good on your team, because that's where your pressure is going to be coming from for the most part in blitz packages. If you're running a 4-3 defense, you'd only need 2 linebackers. You don't need 3. So don't feel bad for having a 71 at one of your outside linebacker positions, as long as you have a good middle linebacker and one of the outside linebackers is also good enough to start. 80, 82, something along those lines, you should be fine. You don't need to have 2 95s on your team to have a decent linebacker core, especially in a 4-3. Corner is another very important position as well. I think that one is probably just about as important as your defensive ends. You will notice a very, very distinct difference if you have some bad corners on your team. So if you need to invest somewhere outside of the defensive line, I think corners is a very important part. Safeties, I've started to realize that I think Madden just does not give a damn about safeties, because they do not seem to affect the game as well as they should. Obviously, if you have a 98 overall safety, he is going to be a presence on the field. You're going to see him make plays. But as you guys, if you watch my Buccaneers franchise, we had Najee Flowers out there in certain packages, and he was playing very well. He was getting tackles in the open field. He had a pick six, 100-yard pick six, I think it was, or something close to that. So safety is another position where I think you can sort of kick the can down the road, replace him in the draft, find somebody in free agency just to fill in, and then just look for the draft later. I don't feel the need to re-sign a high-end safety unless I really, really like them. And then also keep in mind that once you get into the future and there's some really crazy overalls in your around the league on other teams, it's just going to save you money. Because even though Steven Stamper here is a quality running back, I would say at a 78, any star development, he's only asking for $5 million a season. And, you know, same for this middle linebacker, a 76 overall. Now, is he going to be Ray Lewis? No, he's not. But I definitely could see him being a player in sub packages and probably being one of my starting middle linebackers as long as I have somebody better than him at the 1. And he only wants $6 million a year. So these contracts do sort of work themselves out. If a player is not a top 5 in their position group, which I guarantee you they won't be because Madden just gives XP out like it's crazy and they don't regress as quickly as they should, then you can get away with paying a lot of your depth players because those guys are just not going to be asking for that much money. The game makes them think that they're not worth anything. They're not looking at the fact that they're the best running back on your team. They're looking at the fact that they're the 65th best running back, right? Because there's maybe 15 other players that are a 76 or a 77, and there's another 10 that are above 80, and then there's another 20 that are an 85 or above. So even though they're a quality player, you can work with them. The other teams having all these high overall players is going to drive down the demand from this particular player, and you can get a guy like Tyler Algier for $3.5 million a season, $4 million a season. So even though you have the big contracts, you will also find little discounts in lesser known talent. And of course, if you draft them, they're going to be super cheap as well. So try to fill in everywhere you can outside of the top 5 of a position group, and you should have a quality team. Also, another little tip for managing your contracts is getting the player personnel tree filled out. The reason for that is it's going to give you essentially a discount on signing players at these key positions. So if you know that you really want to pay a quarterback, but then you're going to be hurting at wide receiver, if you go over to offensive recruitment here and you get this broken down here, you can end up getting a discount on wide receivers in the free agency. And now it's not going to give you essentially a huge discount, but what it's going to do is increase their chances of signing with you, which means that your offer is going to mean more to them than another team that does not have this recruitment thing pulled up. So you can actually get players on cheaper deals. You don't have to overpay as much for some of these players if you have this turned on. And there's one for every single position group here. And then also on your under the defensive recruitment, I don't know why it's under defensive recruitment, but it is. You can get a discount on all players under certain overalls. So 80 overall and under, 5% discount. Second tier, 85 overall. Third tier is going to be 90. So you can actually get discounts on players from making sure that your talent tree is filled out under the player personnel thing. And it's just something that a lot of people don't think about, but it can be helpful. Yes, it's only 5%. That 5% is then put over all of your positions, and now it's actually a very big percentage of your contracts are being just a little bit cheaper. You know, maybe they're a little bit easier to re-sign. You don't have to spend that extra $2 million on signing bonus. You know, if you think about it, every time you overpay a player, let's just say you have to add $3 million to their signing bonus to get them to decide to come to you in free agency. And let's say you don't have to do that extra $3 million. And now let's say you do that on over the course of 2 years, 10 players. You just saved yourself $30 million just by simply not having to bump up what they're asking for as much because you have the discounts, you have the more likelihood increased chance of those positions signing. So while it's a small amount in general, in the broad scheme of things, over the course of multiple years, you actually save yourself a lot of money and headaches by having this player personnel tree filled out. Also, another big important part, scheme fits. If you find a player that is a scheme fit, chances are they are going to be more willing to sign with you. They'll be cheaper, and it won't be as much of a fight. So look for players that are scheme fits to also help fill in your roster, so that way, even if they're not the exact player you want, they give you the added depth you need or the starting capacity that you need without the dollar signs that come with it. And yes, I know this was a video, just a bunch of rambles and a bunch of random information. This was more just a follow-up. This is not meant to be like a standalone video where people just come in and know exactly what's going on. I felt like after I did the initial breakdown, I didn't want to put too much information into the first video because I want to keep things separated. So this video is more of like a follow-up to add to the original salary cap video I did a couple weeks ago. And just some extra tips. And as always, if you guys have any questions, things that I didn't cover, maybe you want some more elaboration on what I said, put it down in the comments below. I look through them all. I might not get to you right away, but I will get to you. Unless you say something that's just like, I already know I answered it and I probably won't get back to you. Just watch the video back. So if you ask a question and I don't respond to you, chances are you didn't catch when I said it in the video, and that's why I didn't respond to you. But for those of you who actually have questions that are not answered or something I forgot about, let me know down below. I will gladly message you back, and I will let you know if whether I know the answer right away, or if I'm going to put it in another video, or if I have to do some studying, whatever the case is. And once again, thank you guys all so much for watching. If this was helpful, please hit that like down below, subscribe if you have not already, and turn on that bell notification. I will see you guys next time.